Hey Sega, we need to talk. Well, I need to talk to you. A lot of people do, actually. But let's start here. You and me, one-on-one. I want to talk to you about what's been going on with Virtua Fighter. Because, frankly, the way you've been treating it is kind of concerning. Fighting games are flourishing right now in a way we haven't seen since the early 2010s. Street Fighter 6 is a smash hit, Strive has turned Guilty Gear into a household name, Mortal Kombat is printing money like always, there's plenty of buzz for the new Grand Blue Fantasy Versus and Under Night In-Birth games, and players of all stripes, competitive and casual, are eagerly anticipating the imminent release of Tekken 8. If there was any time to really push Virtua Fighter, it'd be now. But you're not doing that. Not really. In fact, you're kind of doing the opposite. And that's weird. I mean, you know how hugely important Virtua Fighter is to the entire medium of video games, right? The one time that military technology got used for something that could actually be a net benefit to humanity was when you created the first Virtua Fighter. Not only inventing an entire subgenre of fighting game, but also paving the way for 3D game development in general. It's not a stretch to say that we would not have 3D video games without Virtua Fighter. We certainly wouldn't have 8 mainline Tekken games plus their countless spin-offs without VF, and 3D fighting games as a whole wouldn't have walls, variable environments, or universal lateral movement without VF. And yet, Tekken is the only game left in town, while VF, the game that Tekken and every other 3D fighting game owes its existence to, stagnates. So what gives? What's the difference? The difference is that Bandai Namco wants people to play Tekken. You, on the other hand, don't seem all that interested in letting people play Virtua Fighter. Maybe you disagree with me on that one though. Surely I must have missed Virtua Fighter 3 TB online. Sega just put that out. Yeah, you did. As a Japan-only arcade exclusive. Oh, but maybe that's fine. After all, VF3 has a cult following in Japan, but in the West, its reputation is a bit messier, thanks especially to the very compromised Dreamcast port of the game being the only way most people got to play it. Maybe it would have been more trouble than it's worth to try and rehabilitate the image of a game that came out in 1997. And maybe we're not missing out on much anyway, considering that one of the selling points of this new release is that it runs on the same online infrastructure as Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. Speaking of, can we be honest about something? You fumbled that game. Like, really bad. It's actually kind of astounding how bad you fumbled VF5 US, because it should have been impossible to screw up. You took an already fantastic and widely beloved version of Virtua Fighter, ported it over to the genuinely great Dragon Engine, gave it a fresh coat of paint and a whole slew of options for online multiplayer, billing it as a VF package built for competitive play. And then you used the same netcode that you used back in 2012. Actually, it might be worse than that, since your slapdash attempt to supplement the netcode by running matches through Google Relay servers didn't seem to account for how those servers are distributed. Like, how Australia only has one server despite being like 3 times the size of Japan, or how there are 0 servers on the entire continent of Africa. By modern standards, VF5 US is basically unplayable online anywhere that isn't Japan. So it's kind of galling that your own producer would see the low engagement numbers and assume that the reason no one in the West is playing is because we're just behind on the times on online tournaments, and not because the game is locked to a single platform and its online infrastructure literally just does not work if you don't live on a tiny island nation. that's not something you can address by releasing the game for free on PlayStation Plus. Maybe next time you'll listen to your own subsidiary when they tell you that you need to use netcode that matches modern day standards. And that's when you even give us a game to play at all. Prior to the release of Ultimate Showdown, the last home port of a Virtua Fighter game was in 2012 with Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown. And the fact that it was a download-only title with almost none of the single-player content that the series had become beloved by casual players for is probably forgivable. But what's less forgivable is that until the release of Ultimate Showdown, the only way to play the game easily and legitimately was by pulling your PS3 or Xbox 360 out of storage. The game was eventually added to the backwards compatibility list for the Xbox One and Xbox Series consoles, but that applied to 10 people? And you've been shafting the significant portion of your audience without access to arcades where fighting games still exist even longer. We missed out on Virtua Fighter 5R, the arcade-exclusive update to Virtua Fighter 5 that added Taka Arashi and John Kujo, and is largely only different from Final Showdown in terms of what systems got overhauled in the transition. Before that, vanilla VF5 players only got to play the game online if they got the Xbox 360 version, and before that, we completely missed out on Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tuned, the third major revision of Virtua Fighter 4 that many consider to be a high point of the series. For the most part, fans of Virtua Fighter outside Japan have been left to their own devices. If we want to play Virtua Fighter, we have to resort to emulation if we want a stable online play experience or the option to even play the game at all. And it's bad enough that Fightcade has allowed the online play for the Dreamcast port of VF3TB and all three versions of VF4 to completely outstrip that of any of your official releases, but people are more likely to have a better time playing VF5 online if they literally run it on an emulator through a fan-developed PlayStation Network alternative. Hell, the only Virtua Fighter game anyone can play officially on PC is the fucking Mega Drive conversion of Virtua Fighter 2, and we still have to go to Fightcade if we want to play that online. The overwhelming impression I get about your attitude towards Virtua Fighter as a whole is largely 残念ながら日本人ではなければバーチャファイターさせません. But that's not the whole story. Because the truth is that we actually can play Virtua Fighter officially outside of VF5 US or arcade cabinets in a single country. But it's kind of incidental because you won't allow us to purchase them for use at all. You are, however, more than happy to let us buy Like a Dragon games. Because Virtua Fighter, like just about everything else in your back catalogue, has been relegated to being a minigame in a completely different series, causing people to have to come up with slapdash MacGyver screen sharing solutions in order to play the game with other people online. And if that weren't depressing enough, these ports and perfectly accurate emulators of your own legacy arcade hardware are being developed by your own programmers in their spare time. They do it for fun. Because they love these games. Because they know others love these games. And the best you can do is shove these efforts into a sideshow that people can load up when they want a distraction from an otherwise totally unrelated game. I'm not asking for a new game. No one is. All we're asking for is even a fraction of the respect that you give to longtime fans of the Ryuga Gotoku series. We just want a standalone, cross-platform Virtua Fighter game with online infrastructure that actually matches the standards set by literally every other fighting game in the modern day. We just want to be included in the game that we love just as much as our Japanese counterparts do. And the way you do that is by actually putting in the effort required to make VF worth our time and money. At minimum, a new VF release should have cross-platform rollback netplay and at least some semblance of support from you outside of Japan. You need to demonstrate that you actually want people to play Virtua Fighter. At time of recording, a couple of large YouTube creators in the fighting game space have revealed postcards you've sent to them proclaiming "New Era, New Energy" and to stay tuned for the 2023 Game Awards. Considering that, at least at present, these postcards have only gone out to FGC personalities, the natural conclusion is that this is signaling towards a new Virtua Fighter. And I can't even bring myself to be excited about that. Before, my attitude to a new Virtua Fighter was that I only had to be right once. That a new game would make up for all the times I tricked myself into thinking I was right before. Now though? Well, the way you've treated Virtua Fighter for the last decade and change means that now I expect to be disappointed even if I am right. And I suspect I'm far from the only person to feel this way. So this postcard here is the announcement of a turning point. If the Game Awards roll around and you don't show us a new Virtua Fighter release that we can actually play, then we can all move on, secure in the knowledge that this series has no future. That it will only be a relic, a museum exhibit we can gaze upon and wax nostalgic about a time when you made more than 2 games. And if you're somehow interested in proving me wrong and that you actually want people to play Virtua Fighter, then all I can say is, you've got your work cut out for you.